I found a password scribbled in some guy's handwriting. I was sorting laundry in our basement when I pulled a crumpled note from my wife's jeans pocket. The ink was black, the letters neat and precise, nothing like Julia's rushed, loopy scrawl. Underneath a jumble of letters and numbers, someone had written exclusive access in that same careful script. I'd seen this handwriting before, on flyers for the art club tacked up at the community center in Jefferson County. Victor Mance. The paper still smelled faintly of Julia's lavender scent, like she'd pressed it close before hiding it away. I folded it up, hands steady, even though a cold knot was tightening in my gut. I'm 38, been married to Julia for 12 years, and I'd never gone through her pockets until today. Maybe I should have started years ago. The Jefferson County Fair smelled like cotton candy and engine grease, just like it did every July since I was a kid. I stood by the art contest booth, watching Julia fuss with her third-place ribbon for the 5th time. The red satin gleamed in the late afternoon sun, and her smile was brighter than it had been in ages. "Your work's impressive, truly," Victor Mance was saying, his voice all polished like he was giving a speech. "The way you captured texture in your meadow sketches shows real flair, raw talent." Julia's face lit up, a flush creeping into her cheeks. "I owe it to your advice," she said, "the way you taught me about line and contrast." I stepped closer, cutting in. "She's always had an eye for art," I said, "long before she joined your club." Victor's smile didn't budge, but his eyes slid to me with a glint that felt like he was sizing me up. "Naturally," he said, "I just helped her refine what was already there. Julia's got serious potential." The way he said her name, slow and savoring, made my jaw clench, but I kept my face blank, the same look I use when handling pushy customers at the auto shop. "We should let you get back to judging," I said. "Come on, sweetheart. Your mom's dying to see that ribbon before we head home." Julia's hand brushed Victor's arm instead of mine. "Actually," she said, "Victor was telling me about a private critique session tonight for the top winners. It could really sharpen my skills for next year." I glanced around the fairground, the air thick with carnival noise. "But the contest's done," I said. Victor jumped in, smooth as ever. "That's why tonight's ideal. No chaos, just focus on technique. My studio's lighting is way better than this outdoor setup." Julia was already nodding. "I'll be back by 10, maybe 11, she said, giving me a quick peck on the cheek, distracted, before heading off with Victor toward the parking lot. I watched them go, noticing how she leaned in when he talked, her laugh floating back over the fair's music. That red ribbon dangled from her bag like a little trophy. I was stuck on how Victor had looked at Julia, like a guy eyeing something he planned to own. That password note wasn't the first red flag. A couple weeks after the fair, I started picking up on little shifts. Julia bought fancy new makeup, the kind from high-end stores, not her usual drugstore stuff. She started wearing perfume on Wednesday nights, which just so happened to be when Victor's art club met. Her phone pinged more than usual, and she'd taken to bringing it into the bathroom. But that note? That was evidence. I sat in our bedroom, laundry basket at my feet, studying the handwriting again. Private Collection 47, followed by a string of digits. The paper was thick, like it came from some pricey sketchbook, not a cheap notepad. Downstairs, I heard Julia's car door shut. She'd been at another session with Victor, this one dragging past midnight. Through the window, I saw her check her reflection in the car's side mirror before heading inside. "How was the art club?" I asked when she came upstairs. "Great," she said, already moving toward the bathroom, phone in hand. "We worked on shading techniques. Victor says I'm getting a real knack for it." I slid the note into my wallet and kept folding clothes. When she came out, that new perfume hit me again, even though she was just climbing into bed. "Smells nice," I said. She looked caught off guard. "Oh, thanks, just trying it out for tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" I asked, glancing at the camera bag by the door. "Got another project lined up?" Her smile was quick, too bright. "Just a small one," Victor suggested. "Nothing big." She slipped into bed, turning away, saying she was exhausted. But I lay there, listening to her breathing, knowing from the rhythm she wasn't asleep either. Come morning, she was gone before I finished my coffee. Through the kitchen window, I watched her load not just her camera bag, but a small overnight duffel into the car, the kind she used for weekend trips. For a small project, it sure looked like a big deal. I tried the password on Victor's website first. The art club had a simple page with meeting times and sample sketches, mostly landscapes, a few portraits of local kids. The login box took the username, but spit out the password. I sat in my truck during lunch, Parked behind a grain store in Carson County where the signal was decent, and tried different combos. Maybe Julia messed up copying it, maybe it was a typo. No dice. That night, while Julia was supposedly at the book club, except her book was still on the counter, I tried again. This time I spotted something I'd missed. The main site ended in .com, but there was a tiny link at the bottom. Members only. It had a different URL setup. When I punched the password in there, the screen flickered black, then loaded a bare-bones gallery. No slick design, just rows of thumbnails and folders. The first one was labeled J. West Drafts. My coffee sat cold in my hand. The early shots were harmless enough. Julia in a park, sunlight hitting her just right. Julia by a creek, her hair catching the breeze. The photos were stunning, the kind you'd see in glossy art magazines. But as I scrolled further, the vibe changed. Julia in dim lighting, wearing a flowy dress with delicate straps. Julia laughing, the camera catching a spark of joy I hadn't seen aim my way in months. Then I hit a folder labeled studio work. These shots were different, personal. Julia posed against a rustic wooden wall, her blouse undone just enough to hint without showing too much. Julia in what looked like an old abandoned farmhouse, dressed in something more revealing than substantial. The camera adored her, or maybe Victor did. My hands were trembling when I heard her car pull into the driveway. I snapped the laptop shut and was scrubbing plates in the kitchen when she walked in, humming softly. "How was the book club?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "Oh, it was fun," she said. "We dove into this new memoir everyone's buzzing about. You know, the one about the woman who ditches her husband to chase her own path." She brushed a kiss on my neck as she passed, and I caught a whiff of cigarette smoke in her hair. Julia hadn't touched a cigarette since her college days, but I'd seen Victor puffing away outside the community center between art club meetings. "Sounds like a good read," I said. "Maybe I'll check it out." She paused halfway up the stairs. "It's more of a women's thing, you know, about finding yourself, breaking free from constraints." "What kind of constraints?" I asked, but she was already gone, her steps soft on the stairs, her phone buzzing with new messages. Miriam Holt had been a librarian at the Carson County Library for 35 years before she retired. In all that time, she'd soaked up more dirt on this town than a gossip column. She was also my dad's sister, which meant she had that Holt knack for watching quietly and remembering everything. I found her in the library's history section, sorting old newspapers with her usual precision. "Looking for something specific?" she asked, never one for chit-chat. "Just some stuff on local art history," I said, "for a display at the shop." I figured I'd highlight some local artists, photographers, that kind of thing. Miriam's sharp gray eyes lit up. "Well, we've had a few photographers around here. That Victor Mance guy's the latest. Moved to town about 3 years back from somewhere upstate. Started that art club of his. You know much about what he does?" "I know he's got a routine," Miriam said, pulling a chair over and settling in. "He zeroes in on the women in his art club, starts with solid teaching, builds them up, makes them feel like they're destined for greatness, then slowly nudges them toward more experimental stuff." I kept my face blank. "Experimental how?" "Oh, he's slick," she said. "Nothing too blatant at first. He makes them feel like they're part of some grand artistic vision, something profound. But really, he's amassing quite the portfolio." "Portfolio?" I asked. Miriam leaned back. "Take Clara Vance, who was in his club for a few months a couple years ago. Nice woman, works at the credit union. She told me Victor talked her into posing for what he called high art portraits. All professional, he swore. Tasteful stuff. But then she found out her photos were popping up in places she didn't okay. Online galleries, art forums. He said it was for critique and exposure. But Clara felt used. She quit the club. My gut twisted. "Did she report him?" "Report what?" Miriam said. "She'd signed his release forms, and Victor's careful to stay just inside the legal lines. He's good at pushing boundaries without breaking them." She stood, walked to a filing cabinet, and pulled out a folder of old newspaper clippings. "The thing is, Clara wasn't the first, and she won't be the last. I've seen this play out 3 times since he showed up. Young women join his club, get caught up in his talk about their potential, agree to more and more personal photo sessions, then fade out when they realize what's really going on." She handed me a clipping from an art fair, Victor grinning next to a display of scenic sketches. "He's got a shiny reputation, a real pillar of the art scene," she said. "But the women who've worked with him one-on-one, they tell a different story." "Miriam," I said, choosing my words carefully, "if someone wanted to dig into how he operates, where would they start?" Her expression didn't shift, but her posture sharpened. Just talking hypothetically, right? Well, I'd guess someone with decent computer skills could track down his work online. He's proud of his collection, keeps everything archived, no matter what he tells his models about deleting their photos after a while. She tucked the clippings back into the folder with crisp movements. Of course, that's just small-town talk, but in a place like this, talk tends to hit pretty close to the truth. Miriam fixed me with a stare, and I caught a glint in her eyes that reminded me of my old man. The Holt family had a knack for spotting what others overlooked. "If you're putting together that shop display," she said, "I'd pick your artists carefully. Some folks' work doesn't deserve the spotlight." The Carson County Harvest Festival rolled around every September, the kind of event that closed down Main Street for half the day while everyone gawked at floats celebrating local history. I'd been going for 30 years, first with my parents, then with Julia. This year, Julia bailed, saying her head was pounding. I was standing with the Wilsons near the judging platform, watching the high school band mangle a mix of old-timey tunes, when I spotted her. 2 blocks down Cedar Avenue, she was hustling along in what I'd come to know as her photo shoot getup. Ripped jeans and a breezy top that looked good in soft light. A camera bag slung over her shoulder, she was glued to her phone as she walked. Cedar Avenue only led to one place worth snapping pictures: Victor's studio. I mumbled an excuse to the Wilsons and trailed her, keeping my distance. The festival crowd was thick enough that nobody noticed me slip away. By the time I hit Cedar Avenue, Julia was gone, but warm light spilled from the windows of Victor's studio. It was an old factory space, all big windows and rough brick walls, perfect for photos, Victor always bragged. I'd never stepped foot inside. I looped around to the back, where a service door was cracked open. Through the gap I heard voices, Julia's laugh, bright and carefree, then Victor's low voice. "That's it, hold that. The light's hitting you just right." "Is this artistic enough?" Julia asked. "I don't want it to look—" "Trust me," Victor cut in. "You're a natural. The camera sees what I see. Someone bold, radiant, unafraid to shine." I nudged the door open enough to slip inside. The back room was a mess of gear, tripods, light stands, cables snaking across the floor. But the walls stopped me cold. They were plastered with corkboards, pinned with dozens of photos. Not the slick shots from Victor's website, but raw contact sheets, unpolished proofs showing every angle, every candid moment. And there, mixed in with pictures of at least 6 other women, was Julia. The shots stretched back months. Julia early on, shy and awkward in front of the lens. Julia is getting bolder, playing with poses and outfits. Julia in less and less clothing, her face growing surer each time. What hit me hardest was the arc of it all. Victor wasn't just taking pictures, he was weaving a story, frame by frame, of a woman falling under his spell. "Let's try something fresh," Victor's voice floated from the main studio. "There's a rawness in your eyes the camera eats up. Don't shy away from it." I edged closer to the corkboards, studying the sheets like they were wiring diagrams. My dad taught me to piece together a whole system from scraps of info, and these photos were a map of manipulation. I pulled out my phone and started snapping pictures of the boards, moving fast but careful. Evidence, proof of what was going on. A floorboard groaned behind me. I whipped around, expecting Victor or Julia, but the back room was empty. Another creak, definitely footsteps, but from somewhere deeper in the building, someone else was here. I pocketed my phone and headed for the service door, but Julia's voice stopped me, closer now. "I should probably get home soon. The festival's wrapping up, and he'll wonder where I am." "Of course," Victor said. "We got some killer shots today. You'll love how they turn out." "When can I see them?" "I'll have them edited by next week," he said. "I'll upload them to your private gallery folder so you can check them before we pick the ones for your portfolio." I slipped out the back door and around the building, heart pounding like a drum. By the time Julia stepped out the front, I was half a block away, blending into the festival crowd as it thinned out. I watched her head to her car, that satisfied smile on her face, her shoulders loose and easy. She looked like a woman coming back from something secret and thrilling. When she got home 20 minutes later, she was pressing an ice pack to her forehead, grumbling about her headache. The next night, I was fixing dinner while Julia marked up assignments at the kitchen table. Art projects from her part-time gig teaching at the elementary school. Kids' drawings of houses, dogs, and families, all vivid colors and wonky shapes. "How was your day?" she asked, eyes on a picture of what looked like a green horse. "Busy," I said. Tom Reese came by the shop looking for custom bolts for his shed rebuild. I had to order them special. She was texting under the table, her thumb flicking across her phone screen. I caught the little smile when a reply pinged back. Better headache? I asked. Yeah, much, she said. Popped some painkillers and rested a bit. Good to hear, I said. I was worried. You were missing the festival. You always love that. She finally looked up. I just wasn't up for the crowd. Sometimes you need a quiet moment to reset, you know? I slid a plate in front of her, meatloaf with green beans and mashed potatoes, her go-to Sunday meal for years. She took a bite and made a small, happy sound, but her eyes were already back on her phone. This is great, she said. You're really nailing the flavors. Been making it the same way forever, I said. Well, you're getting better, she replied. Her phone buzzed again, and this time she couldn't hide the spark in her eyes when she read the message. Good news? I asked. Oh, just Victor, she said. He thinks I'm ready to submit to a major art competition. There's a big art show in the city that could put my work on the map, Julia said. I sliced my meatloaf with slow, deliberate cuts. You're already getting noticed, I said. Your stuff's always been top-notch. Something in my voice made her pause and look at me, eyes narrowing. What's that supposed to mean? I'm saying you've got talent, I replied. Always have. You don't need competitions or some coach to tell you that. Julia's fork hovered over her plate. Victor's not just a coach. He's opening my eyes to what's possible, showing me I can be more than a small-town art teacher sketching butterflies with kids. Her tone had a sharp edge, and I could tell those weren't her words. They were Victor's, recited like she'd been sold on them. Nothing wrong with teaching kids art, I said. No, but there's nothing wrong with wanting more either, she shot back. Chasing real art, real recognition, real impact. She set her fork down. You know, professional galleries, exhibits, the kind of work that actually matters. Not just snapshots of my cousins or the fields we hike through on vacation. That's not what I meant, I said, but her phone buzzed, splitting her focus. She glanced at the screen, typed a quick reply, and I caught the contact name, V Studio. I've got to run out for a bit, she said, standing abruptly. Victor needs to go over the submission rules for the competition. It's important to nail the details now. We're in the middle of dinner, I pointed out. It won't take long, she said, already grabbing her purse and coat. An hour, 2 tops. Don't wait up. You've got an early shift. After she left, I sat at the kitchen table, poking at my meatloaf alone. Her plate sat across from me, barely touched, the food going cold. Outside, the September night settled over Carson County, and somewhere in the glow of Victor's studio, my wife was chasing possibilities she never knew she wanted. I cleared the table, scrubbed the dishes, and thought about talent and validation and what real art even meant. Then I went upstairs, fired up the computer, and opened that private gallery again. New photos had been added to Julia's folder, taken that day. Based on her outfit and the soft lighting, she stared into the camera with a look I hadn't seen in our bedroom for months. Bold, alive, almost electric. She looked like a woman falling for someone else. I started tailing Victor on Wednesday nights. It wasn't hard. Carson County's small enough that there aren't many places to go, and Victor's routine was like clockwork. Art club until 9, drinks at Callahan's bar until 10:30, then a stop at the 24-hour gas station for smokes and a coffee. But on Wednesdays, he made an extra stop. Carson's self-storage sat on the edge of town, a cluster of gray metal units behind a chain-link fence. Victor's pickup rolled through the gate at 11:15 sharp, pulled up to unit B19, and parked. I watched from across the street, engine off, as he unlocked the roll-up door and spent about 20 minutes inside. When he came out, he was hauling a bulky equipment case, the kind photographers use for high-end gear. The next Wednesday, same deal, except he stayed longer and came out with 2 cases. On Friday, I swung by the storage place during my lunch break. The manager was Greg Tillman, a guy who graduated a couple years behind me and used to sell car parts before the storage gig paid better. Well, look who it is, Greg said. How's Julia doing with her photography thing? Real good, I said. That's why I'm here. Thinking about surprising her with some storage space for her gear. You know how much stuff piles up. No kidding, Greg said, pulling out a site map. We've got that Victor Mance guy renting 2 units already, B19 and B24. Says one's for props and backdrops, the other's set up like a digital workspace. He pointed to the map. These end units are a hit with artsy folks. More room, better airflow. Victor's the only guy I know who had an electrician come out to wire up his unit, though. Electrician? I asked. Yeah, for his tech setup, Greg said. Says he does digital editing out there, needs climate control for his computers. Guy's intense about his craft. I'll give him that. I studied the map, clocking the layout of the access roads and where the security cameras sat. What kind of hours do people get in here? Round the clock, Greg said. That's our thing. Creative types like Victor keep weird schedules. He's usually here late, but the gate code works anytime. He handed me a brochure and his card. Let me know if Julia wants to check out a unit. I'll give you the tour. That night, I parked across from the storage place thinking about digital workspaces and computers that needed special wiring. I thought about hidden galleries and backup files and the line between art and something uglier. Most of all, I thought about what Miriam had said. He never deletes anything, no matter what he promises about pulling photos down. I didn't break into Victor's unit. I didn't need to. Instead, I showed up to his next open studio night. They were advertised in the local paper as Art Appreciation Evenings, a chance for folks to check out local work and maybe sign up for classes. Victor charged $5 at the door, set out cheap wine and crackers, and propped his best landscapes and portraits on easels around the studio. I bought a ticket under the name T. Weston, close enough to my real name to answer to, different enough to fly under the radar. I paid cash and showed up late, when the place was packed enough to blend in. Victor worked the room like a seasoned showman, chatting up hobbyist photographers and praising the artistic vision of their wives. He was decked out in a charcoal blazer and pricey jeans, every bit the polished artist he played himself off as. The trick to a great portrait, he was telling a small crowd by the window, is capturing the soul of your subject. The lens cuts through the surface to find who they really are. When they trust you completely, that's when you get something real. I nursed my cheap wine and scoped out the studio. High-end lighting rigs, clearly costing a fortune. Cameras and lenses lined up like they were ready for inspection. A computer set up in the corner, with fancy monitors and what looked like a server stack. But it was the wall calendar that made me freeze. September was packed with club meetings and one-on-one slots. But October had something else. A members-only showcase private collection set for the second Friday. I locked the date in my head and drifted toward the computer station. The screens were dark, but the setup was clear. External drives hooked to a main tower, a printer built for gallery-quality prints, and network cables running to what Greg had called servers. This wasn't just a studio, it was a full-on operation. Into the tech side of things? Victor appeared next to me, swirling a wine glass. Most folks get caught up in the art, but the gear's pretty cool too. I turned, hoping my fake name would hold if he checked the guest list. Nice setup, I said. I dabble in photography myself. Digital stuff's a must these days. Absolutely, Victor said. I keep everything backed up. Multiple drives, cloud storage, the works. You never know when a shot might turn out to be a big deal. Big deal how? I asked. His smile had a sharp edge. You build connections with your subjects over time. What starts as a small local project can end up having real artistic weight. I like to be ready for that. He nodded toward the calendar. In fact, I'm putting together a special showcase next month. Small crowd, curated vibe, the kind of work that takes a refined eye to appreciate. What kind of work? Intimate portraits, he said. The human form, raw and strong. Not everyone gets the value of it, but for those who do, he shrugged. It's powerful stuff. I nodded like I was sold. Sounds worth checking out. I'm always looking for folks who get serious photography, he said. Want me to put you down for the invite list? That'd be great, I said. He pulled out his phone. T. Weston, right? Email? I gave him a throwaway Gmail I used for online shopping and watched him add me to a list labeled Private Showcases. 20 minutes later, I was back in my truck, that $5 wine still sitting heavy in my gut. I'd seen enough to get the picture. This wasn't just about Julia. It was a whole system. The invite came 3 days before the event. You're cordially invited to a private collection showcase featuring intimate portraiture by Victor Mance. Friday, October 13th, 7 p.m. Wine and light refreshments provided. Limited space for an optimal viewing experience. I drove to a neighboring town and picked up a jacket I'd never wear again, plus some artsy-looking glasses. Probably overkill. Victor would be too wrapped up in his show to notice me, but I'd learned to play it safe. I showed up at 7:15 when the studio was already buzzing with about 24 people. I recognized a few faces. The wife of the credit union manager, a retired art teacher from the community center, folks who showed up at every cultural event in town, acting like they were above it all. The studio was transformed. Professional lights gave it a gallery feel, with wine tables in every corner. But the photos stole the show. Huge prints hung on temporary walls, each lit like it belonged in a museum. And there, blown up to poster size, was Julia. She leaned against a rough wooden backdrop, wearing a loose blouse that slipped off one shoulder. The lighting was warm, the framing flawless. She stared into the lens with a look of total trust, a hint of something deeper in her eyes. The placard below read, Private Muse Series JW, Archival Ink Print. I moved through the exhibit, snapping discrete photos with my phone. There were 6 shots of Julia total, spanning months of sessions. You could see her ease into the camera over time, letting her guard down more with each frame. But she wasn't the only one. The walls held intimate portraits of at least 4 other women, all shot with the same skill and soft lighting, all labeled as private muse projects, all clearly not meant for public eyes. Stunning work, isn't it? An older woman stood next to me, studying Julia's photos with a scholarly air. Her scarf screamed money and taste. Really striking, I agreed. Victor's got a gift for capturing what makes a woman shine, she said. They look so free, so real. It takes serious talent to build that kind of trust between artist and model. Across the room, Victor was holding court with a small group, his voice dripping with that familiar artistic swagger. It's all about making the subject feel safe enough to be themselves, he said. When they let you see their vulnerability, the camera catches something extraordinary. A woman I didn't know raised her hand slightly. How do you get people to agree to such personal photos? That must take some convincing. Victor's laugh was smooth, practiced. Not convincing, teaching. Society's trained us to see the human form as something to hide, not celebrate. My job is to help them see themselves the way I do, as art worth sharing. He nodded toward Julia's photos, his eyes lingering a little too long. Victor was holding court, gesturing at Julia's photos. This model, for example, started out as a total novice, he said. She had raw talent but no confidence, no sense of her creative potential. Working together, she uncovered sides of herself she didn't know existed. You can see the transformation in the series. My fists tightened, but I kept my face blank, blending into the crowd. Around me, people nodded like they were critiquing a masterpiece, treating my wife's private moments like some high art exhibit to dissect. My phone buzzed with a text from Julia. Grading papers late at the school. Don't wait up. The timestamp read 7:47 p.m. She was supposed to be at the elementary school, prepping for next week's classes. But when I glanced at the studio's back door, I caught a familiar outline through the frosted glass. Someone was waiting in the alley. I slipped out of the gallery, circled the block, and approached the alley from the other side. Julia's car was tucked in the shadows, and there she was, behind the wheel, checking her reflection in the rearview mirror. She was dressed for an art opening, a sleek black dress, makeup sharper than her usual teacher look, earrings I hadn't seen since our anniversary dinner 2 years back. As I watched, she stepped out and headed for the studio's back entrance. Victor appeared in the doorway, greeting her with a quick kiss on each cheek and words I couldn't catch from where I stood. Then they vanished inside together. 15 minutes later, Victor was back in the main gallery, addressing the crowd. I've got a little treat tonight, he said. I'll be sitting down with one of my muses to talk about the creative process. The audience buzzed, clinking wine glasses, clearly expecting some deep artistic chat. I'd already snapped photos of every picture in the exhibit and left through the front door. By the time I reached my truck, I had a full record of Victor's show and proof that my wife was playing a part in her own public exposure. The only thing I didn't know was whether she realized what was happening or if she still thought this was all about art. Miriam called me Monday morning while I was unlocking the auto shop. You might want to brace yourself, she said, straight to the point. I flipped the sign to open and settled behind the counter with my coffee. What's up? I had coffee with Clara Vance yesterday, she said. You remember Clara? I worked at the credit union, was in Victor's art club a couple years ago. Yeah, I remember. Well, Clara's been keeping tabs on Victor since her time with him, Miriam said, partly to look out for other women, partly because she's still sore about how he used her. She says Victor's been boasting around town about a big break. I heard pages rustling. She was reading from notes. Some gallery owner from the city, a guy named Lorenzo Bellini, is into modern portraiture. He's coming to Carson County next weekend to check out Victor's work. If he likes it, he wants to feature Victor's intimate portraits in a show he's putting together for January. Victor's calling it his ticket to the big leagues. My grip tightened on my mug. What kind of show? The kind that had put those private photos in front of hundreds of strangers? Miriam said. Clara asked him what happened to the women in the pictures. He said real artists know their work belongs to the world, not just the models. I think they should be thrilled for the exposure. Her voice had that sharp bite she got when she was pissed. If those photos go up in a city gallery, everyone will know who these women are. Small-town folks, most of them married, all thinking they were making something private and artistic. How much time did we have? I asked. Bellini's coming Saturday, she said. Victor's planning to show him everything, not just the polished stuff from his gallery night, but the raw shots, the full sessions, what he calls the complete creative journey. I went quiet for so long that Miriam spoke up. Are you still there? I'm here, I said. Miriam, I need to ask you something, and I need you to shoot straight with me. Always do, she said. If someone wanted to book the community center for next weekend, how'd they do it? There was a long pause. Well, she said carefully, they'd call the booking manager, Karen Holt. She's no relation, by the way. But the hall's usually reserved months out for events. What if there was a last-minute opening? Funny you mentioned that, she said. The Thompson wedding reception was set for Saturday night, but they called it off last week. Karen's scrambling to fill the slot so the center doesn't lose the deposit. I grabbed a pen and paper. What time was the Thompson thing supposed to start? 7, she said. Same time as Victor's usual gallery nights. Miriam, if I book that hall for Saturday, would you help me pull something together? Depends on what you're cooking up, she said. I'm thinking about throwing my own art show, I said. But I'd need someone with your knack for digging up details to help me put together the right kind of display. Miriam went silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, there was a spark of approval in her voice. I think that's a damn fine plan, she said. And I've got a good idea of what kind of display would really open some eyes around here. Thanks, I said. Don't thank me yet, she replied. Save it for when we see how this all shakes out. After Miriam hung up, I sat in the quiet auto shop, thinking about the clock. Saturday was 5 days away. 5 days to plan, pull together, and put an end to this mess for good. I grabbed my phone and called Karen Holt about booking the community center hall. Tuesday night, I drove to a print shop in a nearby town, using their high-end machines to churn out gallery-quality posters. The photos I'd snapped at Victor's exhibition were sharp enough to blow up large, and the shop owner didn't bat an eye at the content as long as I paid cash. But these weren't Victor's dreamy, polished shots. These were the raw, unfiltered images I'd found in his studio. Awkward moments between poses, bad angles, harsh lighting that showed every imperfection. For every artsy portrait Victor showcased, there were dozens of outtakes that laid bare the truth. Regular people trying to be something they weren't. Caught in moments of doubt, adjusting their hair, or looking uneasy under the lens. Wednesday, I rented tables and easels from a party supply store. Thursday, I printed invitations, mimicking Victor's private showcase design but with a key twist. Community art showcase, an educational display of local photography. All welcome. Friday evening, while Julia was supposedly at another lesson planning session, I set up my counter exhibition in the community center hall. I mirrored Victor's setup exactly. Wine tables in the corners, borrowed easels with professional lighting, even the same soft jazz playlist. But instead of glossy, romantic portraits, the walls showed the clumsy reality of amateur photography. Every image was labeled with cold precision. Raw session file 19, unedited or between poses, subject JW. The effect was like watching a stage magician's trick get broken down step by step. I'd sent invites to Victor's private showcase list, plus a wider blast to local bigwigs, school board members, church leaders, anyone who might care about what was going on in Carson County's art scene. Saturday night at 7 on, the first guest trickled in. By 7:15, the hall was packed, busier than any event I could remember. The crowd's reaction hit fast and hard. People drifted through the display in stunned quiet, comparing the raw images to the polished ones they'd seen at Victor's show. Whispers turned into louder murmurs as the truth sank in. "Is that Julia Weston?" someone said. "Look at this sequence. He kept every single shot. She didn't know these were out there, did she? How many other women are in on this?" By 8, her phones were out, and people were posting pictures online. Someone started live streaming parts of the exhibit, and the community center's Wi-Fi buckled under the traffic. That's when Julia walked in. She burst through the main doors wearing that same black dress from Victor's gallery night, clearly expecting a different kind of event. Her face cycled through confusion, then recognition, then raw horror. "What the hell is this?" she said, loud enough to stop the room. Every head turned her way. I saw the moment it hit her. Everyone knew. Everyone had seen. Everyone understood what she'd been doing in Victor's studio. "This is your art," I said, keeping my voice low. "All of it, not just the pretty pieces." Her eyes flicked from photo to photo, taking in the angles she never knew existed. Every moment of hesitation, every stiff pose, every glance at Victor for approval. "You had no right," she said. "I had every right," I shot back. "You're my wife. These are pictures of my wife, shown without your say-so, just like you showed them without mine." Victor stormed in then, his face red with fury. "What do you think you're doing?" he shouted. "This is theft. This is slander." The crowd parted, and I could see phones recording every word, ready to spread his outburst far and wide. "I didn't steal a thing," I said, calm as could be. "You kept all the backups. I just used them. Your studio was open during a public event. Your files were right there with passwords you handed out." "You broke into my system," he snapped. "I documented what you showed me," I said. He looked around, finally getting it. His private showcase was now public, his carefully spun story replaced by the unfiltered truth. "This is harassment," he said, but his voice was shaky, losing steam. "No," Miriam said, stepping out from the crowd. "Harassment is tricking women into posing for private photos and then putting them up for everyone to see without their consent. This is just truth-telling." She waved a hand at the walls. "The community deserves to know what's been going on under the guise of art lessons." Julia was crying now, not the delicate tears of some artistic moment, but the messy, gut-wrenching sobs of someone whose whole world had just crumbled. "Please, we can talk about this at home," she said. "Not here, not like this." "We tried talking at home," I said. "You lied to me for months. You said you were grading papers, but you were here, doing this." I nodded at the photos. "You said you were at a book club, but you were posing for shots you thought would make you a star." Julia looked around at the faces in the room, parents of her students, folks from our church, neighbors who'd known her since she was a kid. Every person in that room had now seen Julia in ways she meant only for Victor's lens. "I thought I was making something beautiful," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You were feeding a predator's scheme," I said. Victor pushed between us, his polished artist act finally breaking. "You don't get art or how it works," he snapped. "Those photos took months of effort, real creative partnership." "Months of taking advantage," Miriam cut in, her voice sharp. "We've done our homework, Mr. Mance. We know about Clara Vance, Lila Monroe, Tessa Warren, and the others. Same routine, same empty promises, same private galleries that somehow end up on public display." The crowd stirred, and I saw flickers of recognition on some faces. People were connecting the dots, recalling friends who'd joined Victor's club and then quietly slipped away. "This is a tight-knit town," Miriam went on. "We talk, we share stories, and when someone preys on our women under the guise of art lessons, we don't sit quietly." Victor scanned the room, realizing he was cornered. The evidence was out, the pattern clear. His reputation was done. "You'll hear from my lawyer," he told me, voice tight. "I'm sure I will," I said, cool as ever. "But since everything here came from your own files, pulled during a public event you hosted, I'm not sweating the legal side." Victor turned to leave, but Julia grabbed his arm. "Wait, what about my portfolio? The city show? You said—" He shook her off. "That's dead now. All of it. Your husband's stunt killed any chance of showing this work professionally. But you promised—" "I promised you a shot, and he ruined it," Victor said, pointing at me. "If you want to point fingers for your embarrassment, start with him." He stormed out, leaving Julia alone in the middle of an exhibit that laid her private choices bare for the whole town to see. Miriam stepped forward, gently touching Julia's arm. "There's no good light left here," she said softly, her words both practical and cutting. The community center's harsh fluorescent bulbs showed the photos for what they were. Records of manipulation, not art. Julia pulled away from Miriam's touch. "Don't," she said. "Don't act like you care now." "I do care," Miriam said. "That's why this had to happen. This public shaming had to happen." Julia's voice cracked, rising. "Yes," Miriam said plainly, "because what Victor did to you, to all of you, was worse than shame. He stole your privacy, your self-respect, your control, and then convinced you to thank him for it." Around us, the crowd kept moving through the exhibit, piecing together how the manipulation worked, each photo showing a slow erosion of boundaries. "He made me feel like I mattered," Julia said, her voice breaking, "like I had real talent, real potential." "You've always had talent," I said, "but Victor wasn't interested in growing it. He was using it." "You don't get it," she snapped, turning on me with sudden fire. You don't know what it's like to feel unseen, like you're just going through the motions instead of really living. Victor saw something in me you haven't noticed in years. Victor saw a target, I said. Someone unsure enough to buy his promises, desperate enough to bend her principles for his attention. The words hit her like a slap, and she stumbled back. But I wasn't done. He saw a married woman who felt overlooked and fed her exactly what she wanted to hear. That she was special, that she deserved more, that her husband was holding her back from her true calling. "Stop it," she said, voice shaking. He saw someone who'd agree to more personal photos if he called it artistic growth, I went on. Someone who'd hide things from her family if he made those secrets sound worldly and mature. "Stop," she pleaded. He saw someone who'd eventually believe showing her private moments to strangers was freedom, not exploitation. Julia's face collapsed, tears streaming. "I didn't want this," she said. "I didn't want everyone to see. I thought those photos were just for his artistic work, to help him grow as a photographer." "And you believed him because you wanted to," I said. "Because he told you you were special." The community center went quiet, everyone listening to a marriage unravel in real time. Some looked uneasy, like they'd stumbled into something too raw, but nobody left. This was the showdown they'd come to see. "Tom," Julia said, her voice small, pleading, "we can fix this, we can move somewhere new, and start fresh. Nobody has to know about this." She waved at the photos covering the walls. "We can leave it all behind." "Everyone already knows," I said. "And even if we moved, you'd still be the person who chose this. You spent months lying to me while letting another man photograph you like that." "I was lost," she said. "I messed up." "You made choices," I said. "Every session with Victor was a choice. Every lie you told me was a choice. Every time you put on that perfume and drove to his studio, you picked him over our marriage." Julia looked around at the photos, raw proof of her decisions, staring back from every wall. Not just her image, but her willing part in her own manipulation. "What do you want from me?" she whispered. "I want you to see what you did to us, to yourself, to the other women Victor played the same way," I said. "I want you to understand that choices have consequences." "And then what?" she asked, voice barely there. "What happens after I understand?" I looked at my wife, standing in the wreckage of her choices. I looked at Julia, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in ages. She was still stunning, still the woman I'd married 12 years ago. But she was also someone I didn't recognize, someone who'd put her own ambitions above our life together, who thought secret moments with another man were some kind of creative breakthrough. "I don't know what's next," I said, plain and honest, "but it doesn't start with acting like this never happened." I didn't yell or make a scene. No big speeches or slam doors. I just walked out of the community center, nodding to neighbors and folks as if I was leaving a potluck. "Tom, wait," Julia called after me. "Tom, please." I paused at the door but didn't turn. "We need to talk," she said. "We needed to talk months ago," I said. "Before you started lying, before you decided what you were doing with him was art instead of betrayal." "It wasn't betrayal," she said. "Victor and I never." Now I turned and my face was colder than she'd ever seen. "You gave him the closeness that belonged to us. You shared parts of yourself with him that you stopped sharing with me. You lied so you could spend time with him. What do you call that?" Julia opened her mouth, but nothing came out. The crowd in the community center pretended to look away, but they were soaking up every word. "You chose him," I said simply. "Every time you had a chance to be honest with me or chase his spotlight, you picked him. The only reason it didn't go further is because he got what he wanted without trying harder." I pulled my truck keys from my pocket. "The exhibit's up through Sunday. Folks can see for themselves what Victor's art was really about, what my wife chose to do." "Tom, please," she said. But I was already heading for the parking lot, leaving her under the community center's harsh lights, surrounded by photos that showed her choices in stark detail. Outside, I sat in my truck for a minute before starting it. Through the windows, I could see people still moving through the exhibit, pointing at pictures, talking about what they'd learned about Carson County's art scene. My phone buzzed with texts from folks at the show. "Is this really what's been going on?" Then another. "How long has this been happening?" And another. "Where's Victor now?" I deleted them without answering and drove home. The house felt different when I walked in. Quieter, more real. Julia's photography gear was still in the corner of our bedroom. Camera, tripod, the fancy lenses Victor said she needed to hone her craft. I gathered it all and moved it to the garage, where it could sit until I figured out what came next. Then I poured a glass of bourbon and sat at the kitchen table. where just days ago Julia had been texting Victor while pretending to eat the meatloaf I'd made. The bourbon was smooth, warm, a far cry from the cheap wine Victor poured at his gallery nights. But it did the same job, marked the end of one thing and the shaky start of something else. Miriam called Sunday morning at 10:30. "Victor's loading up a U-Haul," she said, no preamble, "packing up everything he can fit." I was on the front porch with my coffee and the Sunday paper, a habit I'd kept for 15 years. The paper was full of local sports and church notices, nothing about art scandals or exhibitions. Small towns have their own way of handling drama without splashing it on the front page. "Where's he headed?" I asked. "Nobody knows," Miriam said, "but he's definitely skipping town. Probably realized his name's mud around here." Through the window, I saw Julia's car in the driveway. She'd come home past midnight, but we hadn't talked. She'd slept in the spare room, and this morning she stayed upstairs while I made coffee and grabbed the paper. "What about Julia?" Miriam asked. "What about her?" I said. "She came by my place last night after you left the exhibit," Miriam said. I set my coffee down. "What did she want?" "To figure out what really happened," Miriam said. "Seeing those raw photos, realizing how Victor documented every step of his game, it finally cut through the fog he put in her head. She's not just humiliated, she's broken." "She gets it now," Miriam said. "She sees that what she thought was art was just Victor using her, treating her like a piece for his collection, not a person." I stayed quiet, watching a neighbor walk their dog down the street, a regular Sunday morning in Carson County. Except my marriage had unraveled in front of half the town 2 days ago. "She had a message for you," Miriam went on. "I don't need to hear it," I said. "She knows that." "She asked me to tell you anyway," Miriam said, pausing. "She said she understands now. She's not begging for forgiveness. She knows there's no coming back from this. But she gets it." "Understanding doesn't fix anything," I said. "No, it doesn't," Miriam agreed, "but it's something." After she hung up, I finished my coffee and flipped through the sports section. The local high school baseball team was on a winning streak. The Fall Harvest Fair was set for next weekend. Life in Carson County would keep rolling, with or without Victor's creative vision. Around noon, I heard Julia upstairs, water running, drawers sliding, the sound of packing. She came down with 2 suitcases and her purse, wearing plain jeans and a sweater I hadn't seen since before she joined Victor's art club. No makeup, no perfume, none of the artsy flair she'd picked up. She looked like the woman I married, except for the empty look in her eyes. "I'm going to stay with my sister for a bit," she said. I nodded. "I don't know what will happen next," she said. "For us, I mean. But I can't stay here, not with everyone knowing." "Knowing what you chose," I said. She winced but didn't push back. "Yeah." She stood in the doorway between the kitchen and living room, like she might say more. An apology, an explanation, one last shot at saving something from the mess of our marriage. Instead, she set her house keys on the counter and walked out. Through the window, I watched her load her bags into her car and pull out of the driveway. At the end of our street, she turned toward the highway, the same way Victor's U-Haul had gone that morning. I went upstairs to see what she'd left. The bedroom looked bare. She'd taken her clothes and personal stuff, but left the rest. Our wedding photos on the dresser, the novels she'd been reading, the sketch pads she'd collected over the years. On the wall where her third-place ribbon from the county fair had hung, there was just an empty nail and a patch of unfaded paint. I pulled the nail out, spackled the hole, and touched it up with some paint from the garage. By evening, it was like nothing had ever been there. My phone buzzed with a text from Miriam. "Victor's gone. Saw his U-Haul hit the interstate an hour ago. Probably off to find a new muse somewhere else." I set my phone on the kitchen table and looked around the house, now just mine. It felt bigger, quieter, but not hollow, just different. I poured another bourbon and sat in the living room, thinking about choices, consequences, and the line between art and exploitation. Outside, Carson County settled into another Sunday night, and somewhere out on the highway, 2 people who thought they were creating something special were learning what it really cost. The exhibit at the community center will come down tomorrow. The photos would be shredded or given back to whoever claimed them. But the lesson would stick, etched into the town's memory, a community that now knew how to spot the difference between real art and a predator's game. I finished my bourbon and headed upstairs to bed, sleeping alone in our bed for the first time in 12 years. But for the first time in months, I slept without wondering where my wife was or what she was doing. Truth, I thought as I drifted off, was its own kind of calm.